Welcome to the SDA Housing Podcast, brought to you by NDIS Property Australia. Before starting this episode, we need to provide a general disclaimer. Information contained in this podcast is general in nature only. It does not take into account the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. You need to consider your financial situation and needs before making any decisions based on the information in this podcast. And you should consider seeking independent and professional advice for your personal circumstances. All right, let's begin.
Hello, everybody. My name is Debbie from NDIS Property Australia, and you're listening to the SDA Housing Podcast, the show that explains, highlights, guides, and brings awareness about all things SDA in this ever-changing NDIS world. Welcome back once again, Kevin from Paramount Disability Homes. Great to have you.
Thanks so much for having me, Debbie. Good to be back on Black Friday today.
Yes, it is, isn't it? Yep, big sales. Posties are going to be overworked for the next couple of weeks, that's for sure. Yeah, look, today we are going to be talking about something we've been talking about for a long time, but we haven't actually managed to do an episode on this. And it's a very important thing, especially for people who may have apartments, SDA apartments as an investment, or are looking to live in an apartment, or providers working with clients living in an apartment. We're going to be talking about on-site shared supports, OSS.
Complex topic.
Very complex topic. I think we've spent this year talking about it a lot and realising just how complicated it is. I think really it comes down to the fact that a lot of the care providers really don't understand how this works. A lot of SDA providers probably don't. I don't think anyone really understands, unless there are a few providers out there I know who are providing on-site supports and doing it very well. They've managed to get it together, but it's just a bit of a grey area when it comes to how supports are provided in the apartment setup. Now, the first thing, before we go into everything, there's actually a discussion paper that I've got in front of me here from the Summer Foundation. Dates back to May 2022. So we're now 3.5 years beyond when this was written. And I think this was really talking about how it was meant to work, and the whole aim of on-site supports. And then I think we might sort of pick it apart and see what's actually happening in the market.
Yeah.
And why maybe it's not working particularly well. So this is just a one paragraph of a many-page document I'm just going to refer to here. Support for tenants of SDA apartments is provided as a combination of individual support through a separate agreement each tenant has with their individual support provider, the on-site support that is available 24/7 by staff located on-site and shared by all tenants. OSS is provided by one support provider for all tenants and is generally provided by a different support provider than provides tenants individual supports. The tenant's independence is augmented by the use of smart home and communications technology within the apartments. These support arrangements are individualised in comparison with support in group homes or aged care, where all support staff are provided by the same provider.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, that kind of makes it sound like it should be quite easy.
Yeah. I mean, I think the early intentions, for this on-site shared support model were quite good. I guess it in practice, it helps reduce, participants' need for plan supports, as you mentioned. So ultimately, it works as sort of a cost saving for the NDIS. For participants, they don't need, extended periods of plan support. Let's just say if they need a support worker to help make a coffee, they don't need necessarily 2 hours of plan support. They can just utilize a concierge service. I'll give you my definition of it because it's a bit different to what you've stated. But in a nutshell, think of a concierge model. What it means, it's like a shared support worker in the OOA room or the care room, which is a separate apartment. And typically they're there 24/7, okay? You can think of them like a building concierge. So they're not your main support worker, but they are close by if you need anything quick or any unexpected help. So you can bring your own support provider as a participant for all your plan supports, such as personal care, community access, therapy, or any daily routines. And that stays completely your choice. The concierge is only there for unplanned supports. So things like, you might want them to walk your dog. You might want them to make you a coffee. If you have a fall, right, and no one's around, you might call them. So your own support worker does your everyday planned supports, and the concierge is there just to handle any sort of miscellaneous or unplanned activities, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that is because in a group home shared environment, you're going to have staff in the property who can do that. If you do have you drop your phone or something, or you can't access it, you can't do whatever you need. But in an apartment where you're living on your own, when you don't have your supports in the apartment with you, what do you do?
Exactly.
So it makes sense that this system has been set up to provide that ad hoc support.
Ad hoc support, that's good, mate.
Now, before we go into sort of where it works, where it doesn't work, what all the complexities are, there is actually a funding channel for on-site supports for participants who've got apartment funding. Can you explain that?
Yeah, definitely. So funding support, well, essentially participants get funded a separate line item. For those that don't understand, NDIS breaks up funding into a few different sections, home and living, being one of them. So OOA, which is on-site overnight assistance, is funded at a building level, not per participant. So it's actually a line item that sits under SDA. So what that really means is if you don't have SDA funding, specifically apartment funding, you won't have this extra line item that sits below it, which, makes it incredibly hard to get, because with the NDIA, they very rarely approve apartment funding because it's very expensive for them. I think they much prefer that shared 1 to 3 support model. So we're seeing about 5 to 10% of funding approvals at that apartment level, and is an extra line item under that apartment model. So not everyone that has apartment model may get that concierge service. But essentially, they get about 77,000 to be exact per year to be able to contribute to the concierge provider. So let's just say I really want to apply to a certain apartment. I've got my own support provider, still provider, and I've got that extra line item, that's 77,000. I will be paying that 77,000 direct per annum directly to the concierge provider, and they'll be able to deliver it.
Sorry, just you say 77,000. I thought it was 7,000 or something, because 77 seems a lot. It could be nearly double the actual SDA funding.
Yeah, so it's because it's a funding for care. So you're essentially paying, or you're sharing that concierge, or so you're paying for that service. So what that typically looks like is you can access, the concierge for up to about 2 hours is usually the limit that
2 hours per day
that the concierge provider allows you to access it. Typically, it's in intervals between 15 to 30 minutes. So it's a big cost saving, especially for those participants that have really big support plans that might go up to $1 million. So they can really reduce down their hours of planned supports that they need. Yeah.
Okay. So $77,000 in someone who's got a $1 million or a $500,000 care funding within their plan, I suppose, is
relatively small.
Is a significantly small amount. Yeah. Okay. So that's how it's funded from the participants' side.
Yeah.
As an on-site supports provider, how does it work for them?
Yeah, great question. So for them, obviously, they're relying on participants to contribute that 77 grand. And I mean, if you do the math, I always like to think of this in a mathematical way. If they had to provide a support worker around the clock, which is 24 hours on, let's say 8-hour shifts, support work right now typically is like around, at a minimum, about $40 per hour for a support worker. And so if you do 40 times, 24 hours a day for 365 years, it costs them about $350,000 just to have that support worker in there around the clock. That's not
at an absolute
minimum, right? So when you think about it and you divide that by 77K, you need about 5 participants to be contributing to that to make it feasible. So they really need at least 5 participants to be contributing that 77 grand to be able to obtain that service.
Mm-hmm.
So
and this is where it gets messy,
isn't it? This is absolutely where it gets messy. Yeah.
Okay, so if they don't have 5 or more participants contributing to the funding for them to operate their on-site supports, how can they financially make it work?
Yeah, great question. And we've had to come up with all these different types of, solutions to get this working. I'll take you guys a step back. So bear in mind that not everyone that comes into an apartment has this extra 77 grand. So what this means for a lot of participants is that they have to actually contribute out of their core support funding, which they may be utilizing for their current support work or their current support provider. And this is always the first conflict we see, because no support provider wants to let go of their hours that they've got for a participant. When you move into an apartment with an ongoing concierge, we have to make it a requirement that you have to contribute or make some sort of contribution, whether that be $50,000 or $77,000. So that's always the first hurdle. Now, with apartments as well, think of them as, we don't fill them and we don't find tenants for them 10 just off the bat. So it's also about...
It's a slow process of tenanting one by one by one.
It's a slow process, exactly. So It's a very unfair expectation as well for us to have on the on-site shared support provider to start providing 24/7 care from day one, because they're going to be losing money if there's not at least 5 or 6 people contributing to that. So we have discussed and we've implemented what's known as a sliding model. So what a sliding model is they might only start with 8 hours of concierge to begin with, and that would be the overnights.
Like overnight, yeah.
Like overnights. Yep. And, up until we get the 5th or 6th person contributing to, the concierge, we won't be able to ramp those hours up to 24/7. But some people actually need it around the clock. That they just can't live in the apartment.
And they would need on-site supports because they have less daily support.
Absolutely, yeah.
Planned support in their plan.
Exactly. So they actually need that concierge provider to, help them
be available.
Like if you want to leave your apartment and you don't have an automation in your door, which some apartments don't, you need the concierge just to open the door. And if they're not there, you're not going to be able to leave your apartment. Simple as that. So it makes it very challenging for the people that need it, and it also makes it challenging for people that don't require it and they have to feel like they have to contribute to it. So that I think that's the hardest part about the concierge model, is that the people that need it require usually 24/7. The people that don't usually don't want to contribute, and the on-site shared support provider doesn't have the capacity to fund that 24/7 from day one.
Yeah, of course. So if a participant comes along and they've got their own 24/7 supports who are with them in the apartment the whole time and they don't contribute, as you said, it's always recommended that people are contributing somehow. But if they don't want to, I guess they don't have to.
Exactly. So I guess it all comes down to whether or not we would allow it. And, let's just say we've got already 6 to 7 people contributing to the model and we've got 3 more apartments, then sure, we can bring them on, given that there's, they're in a 2-bedroom apartment and the support provider can stay there for the overnight 24/7. But that's not the main concern. The main concern is there's no actual legislation. So you can actually opt out of the model if you really wanted to. So we've seen that happen across a lot of our apartments. People that have been contributing from their plan, and 3 months down the track, they're like, well, look, why am I contributing an extra 77 grand to this thing out of my core supports if I'm not using the service? So then they drop out, and that all of a sudden makes it very financially challenging for the on-site shared support provider, and they might have to cease the service. And if they cease the service, then you've got the people that depend on it. Their livelihood is also at risk. Their day-to-day life is at risk. So we've seen a lot of problems sort of unravel in concierge, unfortunately.
Yeah. And look, we know of apartment complexes that may have 15 or 20 units that are slowly filling up, and there is actually no one even providing any on-site supports at all, because a lot of the tenants that are moving in don't actually need it. So there is no on-site supports.
Yep, exactly. I think the point you make here, and the point we've sort of alluded to is that with apartments, 1-bedroom apartments typically don't really work. So our recommendation, and this is to all the developers that we've talked to as well, is to always build 2-bedroom apartments, purely because if every participant doesn't need concierge at the end of the day, and they can afford to have 24 one-to-one care or overnights, you've got that second room where the support worker can stay. But if you've got only a 1-bedroom apartment, that just makes it extremely challenging. You can't have 10 support workers share the one OA room. It doesn't work. So you really, really need, we've really, really have to rethink what apartment living might look like without concierge. And we've had to close some concierges, unfortunately.
Well, yeah. Look, it is a really big problem. Do you have, obviously you're deeply involved. You do have a lot of apartments under management in Melbourne. And, surely you are working on ways to alternative solutions. What are you seeing is being done in the market?
Yeah, so I guess we've got to make a decision from day one that if we are to go down concierge, that every approval that comes in must have that line item. Otherwise, it just poses a risk on everyone else. We can't rely on people forking out 77 grand from their core supports, and it's not sustainable. So if you in certain apartments, will have at a mandatory, least 80 to 90% have that line item. And if they don't, we help them apply for it. So we go through a SDA funding uplift.
I was just going to ask about that. I would imagine if someone has apartment funding, it wouldn't be too difficult to get that uplift.
No, it's not. It's definitely not. But sometimes, like for some of our apartments, we have clients that have 1 to 3 funding or house funding, and we are relodging an application to get them apartment funding and that concierge line item. So it's usually relatively easier to justify to the NDIA because we will be reducing, for the participant, they will be reducing their hours of plan supports and just through a 77K increase and a bit of an increase in the SDA funding. So for the NDIA, it's quite an easy process to get apartment funding with the right evidence. So yeah, that's the only sort of sustainable way that we run it in apartments. And those are typically for apartments that only have 1 bedroom because you've got nowhere else to run it. If they have 2 bedrooms, we're not running concierge anymore.
Oh,
yeah,
really?
It poses a huge risk on our clients. So
now I know a lot of apartment complexes have a mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms.
Yep.
So that complicates it even more.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the 1 bedroom apartments, if there's more than 7 or 8, then we can just run a concierge out of that. So we can always mix it up. And for the 2 bedroom apartments, we can just run them as normal sort of villas. You can pick them as villas that don't require that concierge.
Wow. Okay. That's news to me. Yeah. I guess most of the apartment complexes I'm aware of in like Sydney, for example, are 2 bedroom apartments that are not operating any of those onsite supports. And that's why. So down the track, I guess developers may not need to even worry about incorporating OA apartments in these developments if they've got all 2 bedroom plus apartments.
Yeah, I had a chat actually recently with one of the developers, and I found this quite interesting about how we can sort of redesign what apartments might look like to make it sustainable. One of the thoughts that we had was to run them. I remember you guys telling me about sort of these Manol homes, but we were thinking about running them as floors, or mini houses amongst the apartments. So to align with the 1 to 3 funding that the NDI seems to be pushing out, we would have an all-way room on each floor, and then 3 separate apartments. So apartment 1, apartment 2, apartment 3 with an all-way, and you would have just a normal sole provider run a 1 to 3 model on each floor.
Yeah, so they're apartments, but essentially the care is being provided in a house or a villa style format.
Exactly.
Yep.
So I think that's the model that we haven't really tested yet, but we think would just align a little bit better with all the the funding changes. But you wouldn't be running a concierge mini houses in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that fits in with that 1 to 3. So just in case anyone's not aware what we're talking about, the 1 to 3 care model is we're not talking about SDA 1 to 3 here. It's purely about the funding that participants have in their plan for their care supports. And most commonly, the NDIA approves care on a 1 to 3 basis, meaning 1 carer looking after 3 participants, which obviously is very difficult in an apartment scenario.
Yeah.
But yet many participants are still getting funded at that level for their care.
Yep, exactly.
So they might be funded to live in a house with 1 other person, a 2-share house, but they have 3 to 1 care funding or 1 to 3 care funding. It doesn't make sense, does it, Kevin?
Yeah, there's a lot of inconsistencies, especially among like SOAR funding and SCA funding is what we're finding. But yeah, I mean, it's
How do you think that has come out? Is it just that there's totally different teams approving the care funding to those approving the SDA funding, and for some reason they don't take one into account when they're doing the other, or?
Well, yeah, I think first of all, it's inconsistency from the NDIA. So their decision team obviously has a lot of, differences in how they approve certain funding. And then also, a support coordinator that doesn't really understand, or the OT doesn't really understand how to lodge a certain report or structure the evidence, they might not get the desired outcome. So it's from both ends. And there's no sort of gold standard on how you do it. It really is a luck of the draw sometimes, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. Is there anything else that we need to we haven't covered that we need to understand about the whole apartment structure in terms of care supports, funding, that maybe we've never covered before?
I think we did a pretty deep dive today. So
yeah,
I think that sums it up pretty well. But yeah, if there's any sort of questions, just feel free to reach out to me or Debbie. It's really complex, but love talking about it.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. Appreciate your time. As always great chatting with you.
Likewise.
And so again, if anybody does want to reach out to Kevin from Paramount Disability Homes, what's the best contact for you?
Oh, just search us up and give us a ring or send us an email.
Paramount Disability Homes, yep.
It's hard to forget.
And that's right. And of course, if you do need to reach out to us, you can get us on info@ndis.property. All right. Well, I think that wraps it up for today. So once again, thanks, Kevin, and we will see you all next time.
Thank you for having me.
Take care for now.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure you are subscribed and following us so you can keep in the loop with all of our upcoming episodes. We would really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, and to share this podcast with those that could benefit. Until next time, catch you on the next episode.